respond to your research statement, or you want to be able to determine the type of research necessary to collect the data. So you need to identify two things in order to fulfill your problem statement and research objectives. In terms of the type of data needed, well, we need to know what type of burgers exist. We need to know information about taste and appeal in terms of look, novelty, creativity, and satisfaction, customer satisfaction of getting a new burger. So how do we actually get this information? To get this information, we need to determine the type of research technique to collect that data, to collect these data. Okay? Possible choices include central location test. Basically, you're picking a location or picking the restaurant as the location. You may want to do a focus group, so maybe one day in that month, you invite random people to come to the store, and you will offer them free samples of the new burger to do a controlled food testing. Okay? And maybe you're not going to just open it to anybody. Maybe it will be your preferred customer. They are considered as qualified consumers or testers. Step 3, collecting the data itself. Once you have figured out the data that you need and how you're going to collect them, you must now go ahead and collect the data. There are two types of data in this world. Okay? There are two types of data. The first data is known as secondary data. Secondary data are the data you borrow from someone else. When you go to the library and get a book, if you ever do that at all, that's known as secondary research. Okay? And when I say that, I actually do mean it, because nowadays it's actually possible to get your whole university degree without ever going to the library. Okay? It's that cool. You can do it literally in front of your computers. Okay? It's that powerful. Now, if you were to look at this course, say, 15 years ago, you wouldn't be able to do that. Okay? But times have changed. All right. So, secondary data are data that have been collected by someone else. You're just borrowing their data to inform your knowledge. Looking at books, looking at journal articles, looking at Statistics Canada's information, census. Those are all data that have been collected for you. Looking at a report, looking at a consultant report, looking at trade journals. Those have all been done for you. So you're merely just reading them to inform your knowledge. The act of doing that is known as secondary data. Whereas primary data, well, you collect the data yourself. You're the author of the data. If you start going out there and count people, how many people pass by Heart Attack Grill, you will actually put 1, 2, 3 for that hour. Okay, if you're only going for an hour, you actually will take one line for every single customer. How many customer actually just browse on the outside and actually don't go in? Well, you'll do another thing, right? So you do that for 1 hour. You have really rich information about how many customers visit the restaurant and how many people just browse outside the store. That is known as primary data. Now you can sell that data to someone else, or you can just give it without selling. All right. So example for the secondary data in Heart Attack Grill is that in 2013, yes, the spokesman. So every moment of the Heart Attack Grill's history, there's a spokesperson. The spokesperson is usually a very big guy, and he will just be eating for free all the time. He will always go on the news. He will be the person when there's a media event. He will be the person to speak about his advocacy for Heart Attack Grill. Now, in that year, the spokesperson for Heart Attack Grill actually died, and the news report said from apparent heart attack. Yeah, he's a very sizable guy, and he was constantly eating a Heart Attack Grill, which isn't very good for him, while waiting at the bus stop in front of the restaurant. Okay, so wow. I actually was able to find this information in the news. Now, customers, so you can actually look at news articles, you can look at press releases. That is a form of secondary data. Next, customers visit this place as a tourist attraction venue. Yes. So just by the act of, say, reading the reviews on blogging websites or TripAdvisors or wherever you go on to, reading the reviews from customers as tourists as customers, that is also known as secondary data. And finally, customer want the most outrageously larger and different type of burgers. So by reading the blogs, by reading the reviews online, you are informed, as an example, that after reading 10 reviews, most customers just want the experience of eating an outrageously large burger. All right, primary data, Heart Attack Grill example, you can gather consumer feedback, live feedback, or not live, but those are original data. surveys from customers, interviews, and focus groups. All right, step number 4, and that is to analyze and develop insights. So once you've collected all your data, got them ready to go, what do you do with them? You're going to have to analyze them. All right? When we say analyze them, we're talking about converting data into information to explain, predict, and or evaluate a particular situation. You remember how we looked at the newspaper advertising in the United States example that I can share with you with the market, with the percentage change example? That graph has been compiled for you already. The data has been collected, all right? And so not only have they collected the data already, the author of that graph that I shared with you converted it into a graph, right? They convert it into a graph for easy visualization. Data is best when it's visualized rather than just a huge, massive table that for one to go through is just too much. Okay? So, you want to be able to create into a visual way, converting data into information to explain, predict, and or evaluate a particular situation. You responded by looking at the graph and saying, you know what, based on the trend year after year after year, after 2012 on 2013, chances are there will be another decline in advertising revenue for newspapers in the United States. Right? So you're already able to make inferences just by looking at that graph in the percentage change marketing module. There are many different ways to visualize your data. You can convert it into a Venn diagram showing different customer profile groups, 10%, 50%, 40%. You can convert it into a pyramid here, recognizing different stages, okay? Building on top of a stage, on top of another stage, or level of importance. For most people, when they go make purchases, price is is that most important? Yes. But in the case of Heart Attack Grill, price is not the most important attribute. For Heart Attack Grill, people are already tourists, so they don't mind paying a little bit premium price. What they're looking for is the wow factor of the burger. They want to be able to take that selfie. They want to be able to post on Instagram and say, wow, I came here and this is it. So can you actually absorb all those data, convert it into a very meaningful, useful way, and also into visualization? Number 5, it's not just good enough to analyze the data and have a beautiful infographic. You need to actually present an action. You need to present a recommendation. Just like your marketing assignment. You're expected to do the SWOT analysis. You're doing basically step 4 for your assignment, your SWOT analysis. But the last section of the assignment asks you to do a recommendation. That is the presentation of an action plan. Knowing what you know from the insights that you gathered, what do you recommend as a next step? What do you recommend the company to do given what you've presented so far? All right? So usually the report contains an executive summary. The body of the report contains objectives, methodology, findings, a conclusion, and all of the appendices. Okay? The result should be short and simple, interesting, easy to understand. Don't get too fixated into the fine detail, and create a visualization with recommendation. Okay. And that is that for the 5 steps as it relates to Heart Attack Grill. Now, let's talk about the differences with secondary data, and I think I'll also talk about primary data in a moment, but secondary data, you may think just going to the library, finding books, or going on the website and downloading reports is easy. Yes. That's only on the surface level. You're only scratching the surface level. A number of secondary data can be found if you are willing to pay for a subscription, and those can be hefty. Okay? Nowadays, with the internet, almost everything is freely available online. It's free for you to access, free for you to download. But there are also ones that you have to pay. The ones that you have to pay, many of them are actually listed here. So, on this table, it shows you external secondary data sources, so ones that you get gathered outside, not the ones you get from that's already collected in your organization. So let me just go back to the previous slide. Secondary data are data that have been collected already. Okay, there's external and internal. External you find elsewhere. Internal are already collected within your firm, within your agency. Alright, so it's internal to the agency. Someone else in another team have already collected. You're in the same company, but you're just borrowing their work. That's internal source. These are external. From annual retail trade publications, to the Canadian yearbooks, to the family expenditure guide. Alright? So someone out there, a publisher, produces all these guides, sources, newspaper articles, indices for you to use. Many of them are accessible as a Ryeron student free of charge. But once you don't have a Ryeron account, many of them becomes as subscription-based. You actually have to pay for them. Okay? So as part of your tuition, every single term, if you're enrolled, you have access to these publications. Not all, but many of these publications for free. Here are examples of secondary external data that are syndicated. Okay? These ones are typically produced by marketing research firms. And to get these data, Ryeron don't have access to them. You actually have to pay for them. Okay? Companies, marketing teams that want this data, they will go and buy it from them. Okay? From the Bureau of Broadcasting Measurement to GfK Media Market Research. GfK is a big brand. It's a popular one as well. Okay? JD Power, etc. So many of these are well-known market research firms. They don't just give their data. They may provide some basic one for free, but a lot of them you actually have to buy. Well, what about external secondary sources? Well, you've got the scanner data. Moments ago, I talked to you about the example of buying clothing at a retail shop, and you're being asked for your postal code. Well, that's it. It's a type of quantitative research that uses data obtained from scanner readings of UPC codes at checkout counters. How many times is a product checked out, and which location? That can be tracked very precisely. Think about the way how Walmart functions. Walmart is the world's largest retail store. They've got many, many stores around the world. Okay? Their inventory isn't just local, their inventory is international. So the way how they manage the inventory has to be very smart, and everything is electronic. Whenever you check out, say, a box of ice cream, okay, a box of ice cream, the machine scans it, it feeds into the inventory system, and they know immediately that it's down by one ice cream box. Now, if they see a trend that across the Greater Toronto area, that for every hour, 30 boxes of ice cream get sold, just by looking at that data, okay, for a few months, they'll know in the following cycle, they need to order so much of these ice creams. Yes? So it's an incredibly powerful tool. If you can just simply look at where people purchase things, how often they purchase things, where are they coming from, okay? And then as a smart marketing student, now you want to know why they're buying. Why are customers buying boxes of ice cream? All right. Here you're looking at primary data. Primary data, once again, are data that you collect yourself. You're the author. Okay, you own it. You don't need to cite it because it's yours. Whereas secondary data, you do have to cite it because it's not yours. There are two distinctive parts of primary. There's the qualitative and then there's the quantitative. Qualitative are usually more descriptive. Okay, they're more text-based, such as observation. Oh, I observed on September the 26th, Marketing 100 class. Students are enthusiastic and very happy. So that will be what I enter in my journal. Okay. However, if I instead said that on September 26th, Marketing Evening class, I conducted a poll of how many students would like the class to be 3 hours every single evening. And the result is 95% would prefer 3 hours, and 5% would prefer 2 hours. Right? So just by doing that, I am doing a survey, right? And I'm quantifying it in a numerical way. So this is highly descriptive, and this is highly numerical. And it can be very scientific. Okay? There's no benefit of one over the other. They've got their merits and weaknesses as well. All right. On this slide, you're looking at, as I mentioned even just before I turn on the slide, there are advantages and disadvantages of secondary and primary data. I'm not going to actually go through every point here, but I want you to know that there is no perfect research method. There is no perfect research strategy. You choose the strategy and the method and techniques that you think are the most fitting, and you make a case for it. That's it. Okay. Can you defend your work? In other words, this is an example that I just shared with you. That I did a poll that 95, in fact, that's a real poll because I just made up one. Okay. How many of you would like our typical Thursday evening MKT 100 class to be 3 hours long? If that's the case, just put up your hand. Okay, we've got 2, 3. Yeah, that you prefer the marketing class to always be 3 hours long. to say 10, okay? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, class dismissed for those 10. All right. Now, how many of you would prefer 2.5 hours every single Thursday evening? 2.5 hours. Okay, so let's assume we've got, say, 30, okay, as opposed to 10. How many of you would prefer to have it as only 2 hours? Okay. All right, so another 30. Okay. How many of you would prefer to be under 2 hours every Thursday evening? Okay. If you can, well, I don't know if you can double dip, but sure.
I only voted once.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, so lesser people for less than 2 hours. That's fine. So as I did this, right, I jotted down, I jot all those numbers down. Can I replicate the same experience the next time around? So if I was to ask the same question the next class, will I get similar results? Okay? And if I was to take the results and bring it to my methodology, and I bring it to another instructor, I say, hey, for your class, try my research methodology in your class. Can that class replicate the same outcome? If that is the case, then you know you've chosen the right research method and the strategy is correct. If you can't, then it's probably not the best one. That is why choosing the wrong strategy may not give you the result that you want, and you end up you're wasting time actually, and not really getting the outcome that you desire. Okay? So choosing the right technique, choosing the right strategy for research is essential. Now, that's kind of what I just said about reliability, validity, and sampling about research. This is a big sample. This is good. But if the class was only, say, 5 people, it won't do the job. I don't know if I mentioned this class. I almost always have Friday evening classes. I actually enjoy them as well, because after Friday night, then I'm finally done. Okay? I actually enjoy that. Now, I'm not sure about the students, though, because my attendance for Friday night class is not the greatest. I had a geography class, and I remember there was one evening, there were only like 3 people, okay, 5 people maybe. It was about the size of this class. And then I'm like, oh, okay, 3 to 5. Now, either be 3, 5, or 50, it's still the same class for me. The show still goes on. But I simply cannot do a sample if it's only 3 or 5 people, whereas I've got 90 people here. In the context of validity and how reliable research is, I want to share with you the Carey subliminal persuasion study. There was a study done, and it's written in this article. This is in the 1987 research study, Journal of Advertising. What they did was, they allowed a number of people to watch a screening of a show, okay, at a cinema. And the cinema's title was called Picnic. And it's run with the standard projector. Now, what happened was that in the projector, they actually embedded a subliminal messaging that says e-popcorn, right? So for every 1/2000th of a second, they will have a flashing sign that says e-popcorn. But it's so quick, our eyes cannot see it in that reflective way, okay? But if we see it so constantly, we might just be able to comprehend. Now, the movie Picnic continues with the audience flocking to the concession stand to buy popcorn. Now, is that really the case? Yes. However, if you actually read into this journal, it will tell you that they have not been able to replicate the science after this. Okay? So it could just be a coincidence that people really didn't like the movie popcorn because all they're looking at is people eating in the movie, and they get hungry looking at people eating, right? And so then they instead go and buy popcorn, which could be the case. Therefore, this would be an example of a research that is not necessarily reliable because the sampling size and the frequency of being repeating again and again is not there. All right. In terms of quantitative research, these are more numerical, as I mentioned, very scientific. It's done when you have a lot of data, a lot of people. Otherwise, it's not the best tool. Okay? You need enough of a sample size to make it into a rigorous quantitative research. If you're going to do a survey and you only collect 5 surveys, have a good day, right? But if you're looking for 5,000 survey responses, suddenly quantitative becomes very powerful. Here's an example of a quantitative research method in its formation. You've got a question with an open-ended box. You've got another question that is kind of like a multiple choice. Yes? Thankfully, for your test, all you got to do is circle. You don't have to write. Okay? Except your group assignment. And that's actually the only thing you're writing. Even for the in-class quizzes, it's multiple choice, so not too bad. Because you're allowing the respondents to just type whatever they want, this is known as unstructured quantitative research. It's unstructured. Whereas if you're allowing people to circle in a certain fashion way, that is known as structured approach to quantitative research. How many times did the respondents answer 4? How many times did they answer 3, 2, and 1? You can actually create a percentage out of that. Whereas the unstructured one, you can't really do that, but you can create themes. So you can say, how many times do we obtain a response that is positive? If it's positive, we'll give it a score of 2. If it's negative, we'll give it a score of 0. Once you tally that many, many, many times, you can also convert this into quantitative, because now you've got a number to work with. All right, so next slide, observation. Observational study is whereby the researcher examines purchase and consumption behavior through personal or video camera observance. This is also known as ethnography. Ethnography is the act of immersing yourself as a researcher in the study population. So once again, ethnography is the act of the researcher immersing himself or herself in the study population. Example, if an alien from Mars is to visit Ryeron and say, I want to know what it's like to be a university student, what is the best way for the alien to study that? Come to class, right? Come to class and join us. That would be the perfect way. And by alien doing that, it will be known as ethnography. The alien is studying how you all study and become a student at a university in your natural daily setting. Right? That is known as ethnography. Observation. Even just talking to the alien could actually talk to you the whole day. I don't know if you can understand me, but can you tell me about your experience in class? Right? So just by doing that, it's also ethnography. Social media is another big one nowadays. We're looking at what's known as sentiment analysis. Social media is very scattered, and there's so many things everywhere, it's very difficult to really pinpoint one thing you want to study. And so one very popular way of studying social media is sentiment analysis. The word sentiment is feelings, opinions, impressions. So what is the sentiment on social media for the federal Canadian election happening in October right now? So if you were to search for Facebook, if you search for Twitter, ... can we see that the sentiments for the Liberal is strong? Are they going to get re-elected? Or is going to be the Conservative or the NDP wearing in orange right now? Yes?
Hi. Not really a good question. The tables that you've been showing us regarding external sources, like the blue and white one, how much, any questions that you like, how in-depth are the questions going to be regarding them?
Oh yeah, so for the table with a number of different type of journals, indices, newspapers, I won't really get into that. What I'm looking for is, do you know what is primary research? Do you know what is secondary research? Do you know the distinction with quantitative and qualitative? All right. Do you know a bit of the pros and cons of either of them? Right? Can you speak to that? That's what I'm looking for. The very, very fine detail, maybe you get like very few questions about that. Just so that not everyone gets 100%, but for the most part, all right? The question I'm looking for are big thinking questions. Do you actually know the content? All right. So even for something like this, like I will not be asking literally exactly that line, right? It's just generally, do you know? Do you know the benefit of using social media for research purposes? Okay. What does it mean by sentiment analysis? All right. So you can go on Twitter, you can go on Facebook, and there's a way of doing that as well. But can you see, out of, say, 10,000 posts about Canadian federal election in October, where is the public leaning towards? For the last 2 weeks, it was all about the Liberal, but it was all about the Liberal in the wrong way, right? Everywhere Trudeau was going, he was apologizing. He just apologized. And then you see some really strange reaction that I've actually saw a number of replies that says, we will only accept your apology if you resign, Okay, so that's very extreme. All right. And then another group of people will say, well, your apology isn't sincere because you apologized too many times. Anyhow, that is reading social media sentiment. That's known as sentiment analysis. Next one here is interview. Interviews is fantastic when you know what you want to ask and when you are really immersed in the research, you're knowledgeable enough to actually ask the right question. Then you can go to an expert and really probe that individual through structured or unstructured interviews. Usually it's semi-structured interviews to allow you to have a guide, but also encouraging you as the interviewer to have a bit of freedom. Okay? But this is often done in real life. Focus groups. The focus group is a great way to gather feedback, and it's not so much a structured way, but a friendly, open forum. Kind of like this, a focus group. Let's talk. Let's talk about which packaging do you like? Do you like the one on the left or the one on the right? Well, if this was a game where you have the circle, you will see that it's different too. Yes. Right from afar, it looks the same, but it's actually different. So even the vegetables here are different, right? You can see that vegetables here are different, right? Whole grain, and it says Italian herbs. Yes? So there are differences. Now, if you're being asked to provide a response in the focus group, it could be about packaging choices, it could be about ingredient choices, it could even be about the actual taste of it. The next one here is known as experimental research. Experimental research is highly scientific. It's actually scrutinized in many, many different ways. There are usually a hypothesis where you're trying to prove, is it going to happen or not happen? Okay? It's usually controlled. Now, an example of experimental research is seen in front of you. And it's actually done many times. When you go to, say, a drive-thru, and you don't want to go into the fast food store to buy, you want to just drive through. You are greeted by this massive menu board. And now you're sitting there in your car looking, wow, what am I going to do? What am I going to pick, right? And so what they're able to do is, by reconfiguring the way how the menu is positioned in the drive-thru section, they will know the frequency of people ordering something, right? Which time of the day do people order more fries? At which time of the day do people order more of the salad? Okay, and they look at those data to determine the positioning, the size, okay, and at which hours of the day do they need to shift the menu so that they will ensure people are buying more of what they typically would be buying already. Okay, so it's a highly scientific and actually measure everything. Now it's not perfect, but it's just one of many ways you can do experimental research. All right, we're in the tail end of the lecture portion before we get to the final marketing metrics. So stay tuned. We might just be able to get it all done in around 2.5. Okay, 2.5. Okay, so ethics and social responsible marketing. So far, you've learned about marketing basics. You learned that it is an application that is entrenched in multiple disciplines and settings. That's true. But it's not about how to outsmart buyers, how to lure buyers into your store. It's not about that, okay? That's why there is the Canadian Marketing Code of Ethics. All right. So on this slide here, you're looking at Joe Fresh. Does anyone buy from Joe Fresh? No, eh? No Joe Fresh customers? After what they did, eh? Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit more. Lower costs are often achieved at the price of labor, safety, and below average labor cost. Now, what I want to share with you is that Bangladesh is one of the world's largest apparel exporter next to China. I remember I actually bought quite a bit of clothing from my younger days, from Blue Jeans. And vast majority of them are from Bangladesh. Now that's fine and everything, but that allowed me to really appreciate the extent of a lot of the clothing that we wear are actually made and exported from Bangladesh. Now, when the Canadian government eliminated or at least imposed duties on clothing made in certain parts of the world, where they benefit the Canadian operators, we saw more Canadian operators ordering apparels from Bangladesh. Okay? Now, what happened was this. There was a very large collapse of a building, commercial building, in that country where the garment factory was housed. It saw many casualties, injuries, and really brought light to how the poor working condition is what it is, as you can see in front of you. This tragedy raised many questions about ethical implication of outsourcing manufacturing to developing countries with poor safety measures. And because Joe Fresh is part of Loblaws in this story, the scrutiny then shifted to how Loblaws is not being a responsible company. Okay? And I just want to kind of talk to you briefly about so this image here is taken in 2013 in the Sabra building, also known as the Rana Plaza. And it was a structural failure that took place, as I mentioned, in 2013 in Dhaka, Bangladesh, where an 8-story commercial building collapsed. And the total number of deaths in this instance was 1,129. So, North American retailers and businesses have been prompted since that event, particularly the ones in the garment industry, have been prompted to really look at the working conditions of developing countries. That, yes, we're getting lower costs by lower wages, but the conditions of those countries are not the greatest. And so how can we, as a first world country, bring light to that problem and improve their working conditions? That is known as business ethics. Okay. Now, business ethics is very broad. If you're going to be taking your BCom here in Ted Rogers, most likely you will be taking a business ethics course. It's almost mandatory nowadays. In the past 10 years, the topics on business ethics have grown a lot, but before that, it's not that important. But 10 years ago, due to the economic crisis and a lot of financial scandal in the United States, many business schools recognize that they need to train the future leaders of businesses a topic about business ethics. Okay. Now, marketing ethics focuses on marketing, right? The Canadian Marketing Association ensures that one must follow generally accepted code of marketing, flows from general norms of conduct to specific values, and some areas within marketing have their own code of ethics to deal with specific issues. So we're not going through the codes of the issue itself, but just know that there are actual codes to monitor the way how the world of marketing conducts itself. Why? Take a look at this slide. This slide here tells you attitude about ethical standards of various professionals. How ethical is your profession in the eyes of the public? All right? So, in this slide, who is the most ethical in the eyes of the public? That's right, followed by doctors, police officers, accountants, real estate agents, okay, lawyers, senators, stockbrokers, but it doesn't matter. The lowest on the list is what? Advertising practitioners, telemarketers. They're essentially marketers. It doesn't matter. They're marketers, which tells you that the general public, you and I, we don't trust marketers in general. And so how can we change that? Well, we change that by being ethical in the first place. And so that will shift the whole perception of the industry collectively. Here you're looking at American Apparel. American Apparel has had a very long, confusing story, starting with its corporate social responsibility. The company was actually founded in the United States, and they pride themselves on being a really responsible company by sourcing the material locally and hiring locals to work in the stores. And on top of that, they made sure that they hired models that are normal people, if I can put it that way. Okay? And so that was what they were really banking on in its earlier days. But unfortunately, they kind of steered away from that corporate responsibility image into what you see in front of you, right? You see images that are quite provocative, right? It's suggestive of how, in this case, women are seen very vulnerable, very sexualized as well. So they're now competing, they were competing in many ways in the sex appeal industry, so to speak. That many other brands also compete on sex appeal, but so are they. They're no longer preaching on a socially responsible company, sourced and made locally with models that are just normal people. Okay? Coupled with its financial irregularities, in 2017, American Apparel went out of business. Okay. This slide just quickly tells you that ethics and social responsibility are not the same. Okay? That's why there's 4 quadrants. You can be both ethical and socially responsible. That's fantastic. Thumbs up. But you can have a questionable firm, yet they donate to the community. So that's odd here, right? They're not very ethical, but they have good giving back program to the community. So they're being socially responsible. You can have an ethical firm, but not involved with the larger community. They are cheap on giving back, but they're ethical. Or they're just very, very bad altogether. Okay? So it's different. Which ones do you want to buy from? Right? Many companies who see themselves as responsible and ethical, they actually preach that in their marketing campaign, in their boxes. For every Tom shoes that you buy, on the label it tells you, we will donate XYZ to a third world country who may need shoes. Right? And so they are trying to be socially responsible. Now, how ethical they are, we don't know. But they're trying at least to tell you that they're being socially responsible. The word consumerism is a social movement aimed at protecting consumers from business practices that infringe upon their rights. So going back to the question, what kind of testable questions do you get on the midterm final exam? Words like this, right? Like these are simple words that in and of itself is a topic, right? You should know. What is consumerism? Well, for us, it's a social movement aimed at protecting the rights of consumers at the end of the day. That's right. That's it. Okay? And in order for consumerism to be possible, employees, the customers themselves, the marketplace, and the whole society needs to be part of that process. All right. Okay, I believe this is the last slide. So, what's really inside here? Let's talk about business ethics. Anyone here a very active drinker of beer? Let's just look around. Yes, yes. Okay, we're phone. William? Julian, are you a heavy drinker? All right. Wrong. Sorry. All right. I remember I took my class out. This is a small class. This is just too big. Okay. Wow. Okay. So come on. Wow. Okay. In that case, I drink. Okay. Does it come with dinner? That time it did, but not this time. No, that was a much smaller class. So what happened was in that we went to the Ram and the Rye. Okay. And I figured they wanted to drink, so we would order some beer pitchers. Now, surprisingly, a number of people don't drink, but they actually pour some in their cups just so that they fit in. I'm like, okay, well, at least tell me you don't drink, so we don't have to worry that much. But anyhow, okay, it was the image of fitting in. It has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, but I think there is a stigma about, oh, if you're a drinker, you're an alcoholic, or it's not good to drink alcohol. Maybe it's a religion, whatever the case may be. But in Canada, it's actually socially quite encouraged, right? The whole notion of casually social drinking is totally fine. Okay. Now, please, I'm not going into any of you that are below of the age to drink. Okay, disclaimer. All right. So, for those avid drinkers out there, you need to know what you're actually drinking. Okay. If you're vegetarian, is drinking beer okay?
Yeah, depends on the beer.
Depending on the beer. Good. So you know, some of you know, but at least for me, I didn't know. I thought beers are supposed to be vegetarian. Okay, I didn't know that. And as I study more about this, I want to share this with you. This is a fish. There are different parts of the fish. The arrow that's pointing to, you want to know what that is? That is known as the isinglass. Okay? Also known as the fish bladders. Fish bladders are used in the production process for Guinness. Yes. And have been for years. Not so much now, but before. Now, the location of this fish swimming bladder, which helps the animal maintain its balance so that they don't flip over, okay, is the bladder's function, one of the bladder's function. Now, isinglass is made from the air-filled swimming bladders of fish, and they're actually used as a filtering device. Okay, so when the beer is murky and it's hard to get rid of that murkiness, they actually filter it through some of the elements of the fish bladder, the isinglass, which is a filtration process that they use in making of Guinness. Now, people didn't know about this. People were just drinking left and right and center and all that stuff. Until word broke out that, whoa, they were using animal parts. They're using animal parts in the manufacturing process of beer. That surprised a lot of people. Okay, and suddenly there was a cry for these companies to be open about how they're making their food. Okay, there's actually a website now that will tell you which beer is vegan, which beer is vegetarian, which beer is just whatever you want. Okay, now not just only that. Oh, Guinness have changed their policy now. They do it completely different. Okay, there is a synthetic way of doing it. Company do not actually have to disclose alcohol ingredients if it's under, say, 1%. If it's 1 to 1%, they actually don't have to disclose. But if you're a staunch religious person, you cannot have a drop, okay? That's assumed. Or maybe you're allergic or whatever the case may be. If it's under 1%, they don't actually have to disclose. So are they being ethical? All right? And so it's actually impacting consumers who are sensitive, who are allergic to alcohol. Therefore, on that note, the moral of this story is just think about what it is that you're eating. Is it actually telling you the truth? And on that note, let's get right into not Module 1, not Module 2, but Module 3. And that is market share and market analytics. Okay. So tonight we're going to go through 3 different ways of calculating market analytics, starting with market share, followed by the 3/4 firm concentration ratio, and then number 3, the Herfindahl index, which is also known as market concentration. There are going to be different formulas, so just know that we're adding to the list of formulas now. When you look at this diagram, this pie chart, what does it tell you? Yes?
Market share of each large computer processor?
Yep, pretty much. The market share of the operating systems, right, of most computers. Now, you actually have to reference a particular year, but you can tell just with this image alone, Windows XP has the most amount of market share, followed by Windows Vista, followed by Mac, followed by others, right? So it actually tells you that right now, visually. For us as marketing students and learners, we want to know, okay, how much of the market has been commanded by your brand, how much, who are the top competitors in your respective field, and how much market share do they dominate? Is it a competitive industry, or is it not a competitive industry? When you look at this, is it a competitive industry, or is it not a competitive industry? Not really, right? Because it's dominated all by Windows. Literally 90% is Windows. So this is a monopoly. It's not good. At least from the government standpoint, it's not good. Okay? If you are Mac, it's not good. But for Windows or Microsoft, it's fantastic news. Yes? And so the whole reason what we're looking at these 3 analytics is to really understand different parts of the market share and how to make a convincing story as to why the industry is too competitive, not competitive enough, or it's completely monopolized by one leading company. Okay, So in this example here, I'm going to continue on. You can see that there's different operating systems, XP, Vista, Mac OS, Linux, other, and the percentages are broken down. Okay? And then there's the Herfindahl index, which is also known as the market concentration index. Market concentration index. The higher the concentration, the more it represents that it's dominant. It's an industry that's heavily dominated by one player, or at least the top two to three players. So we don't want to see a Herfindahl index in some industries to be too high. Okay, I'm going to explain to you in a moment. Okay, let's go through one by one. This is an urban car example of 5 players. You have Zipper, Twister, A1, Bose, Chen. Okay, and so the first column here is number of units sold in thousands. Okay, 20,000, 10,000, 7.5 thousand, etc. The revenue also in thousands. Well, add 1,000 to the numbers you're looking at, hundreds of millions. Hundreds of millions. Okay, so in the market for small urban cars, managers at A1 want to know their firm's market share relative to its largest competitor on the basis of revenues and unit sales. So once again, A1 wants to know its market share relative to the largest competitor. So who is the largest competitor to A1? They're the largest by number of units sold and also their total revenues. Okay? So let's take a look at the formula here. The formula for relative market share, so relative to another competitor, is equal to the brand's market share in dollars or in quantity of units sold. Please note in bracket, in dollar amount or in quantity of units sold, divided by largest competitor's market share, also in dollars or in number of units sold. Okay. Let's plug in the numbers. So, relative market share for A1 unit relative to the largest competitor, 7,500 is A1's units sold. Yes? Because the question is asking you units sold and also revenue sold. We'll start with units sold. Divided by the largest competitors, well, in this case is 25,000. That gives you 0.3. Okay, very, very clear. Therefore, the answer is the relative market share of A1 relative to Zipper is a small number. All right. Now, what if you now take the other side, take the revenue? Okay, it's the same two companies, but now we're looking for the revenue, not for the actual number of units sold. You plug it in, same thing, and you get 0.5. So you can see that even though we're looking at the same company, the outcome, the market share, is different. The number that you're working with is different. Okay? It's not going to end up the same thing, always. It won't. As evident in this case. Let's build on top of it now. Okay. We've looked at the example for relative market share. This is the formula for relative market share. The formula for unit market share is what you see here, and revenue market share in percentage is what you see here. So, once again, you need to know what you're being asked for. Are you being asked for percentage? Are you being asked for units sold? Or are you being asked for revenue, total revenue generated? The question will tell you, and you pick the right formula. So once again, you'll be given a sheet of paper, and all those formulas will be there. In fact, I'm going to try to post the formulas earlier on the website so you can see how the sheet looks like, and you can actually have it with you to practice. Okay? So let's go through this example. We're going to fill up this column and also this column. All right? We're going to fill up this column and also this column. Same companies. All right. You can see that. I'm going to take 25,000 units sold and put it in unit sales. Total number of units sold for the whole market is 50,000. All right? And then you kind of just apply it in there, and therefore you get 50%. You have to multiply by 100. So you do that for every company in this list. You see this. Now, if you do it for the revenue, same thing for the second formula, 375 divided by 937, then you get a grand total of 40%. You do that with all the companies on the list, and you shall get, I think you have all this anyways, right? Do you have all this?
Yeah.
Great. So you have all this. So far we literally are just using formulas to compile it together. Nothing out of the ordinary. Am I correct? Okay. So good. That's the first analytic. The second analytic is known as the three-firm concentration ratio. Sometimes the three-firm concentration ratio is known as the four-firm concentration ratio, or even the five-firm. But most instances, it's known as the three. So only three companies. If it tells you four companies, then you do four companies. Okay? This number will tell you. If it says four-firm concentration, then you do four. If it says three, you do three. Don't do more or less than what it asks you for. What does this mean? Okay? The 3-4 firm cluster ratio, before we get to the formula, is the total of the market shares held by the leading three firms, okay, that are competing with each other. So once again, this ratio, if you're looking at a 3, okay, it looks at the total market share held by the leading three firms or three competitors in the market. So how much market share do they command, the top three players? This is a very simple one. All you need to do is finish the market share and add the top three. So take a look at this. If you're looking at unit, then it's 50, 20, and 15, right? 50, 20, and 15. You add it up. That's it. You add it up and you get 85%. What does that mean? It tells you this is an industry that is heavily dominated by the three large competitors. All the other companies are very small, okay? Because already you can tell if the three top players are, when you add it together, are 85%, it means that the rest of the market are small. They're tiny, tiny, tiny. Okay? Even equilibrium is true. It's telling you that. Anything other than the first three companies are insignificant. So far, so good? Okay. And then again, you do it for the other side of this list. You add the 40, 21, and 20, you get 81.2. It's a similar story in the sense that the top three players dominate quite a bit. Okay, the last formula that we'll be looking at, and this one will take a bit of explanation, is known as the Herfindahl index. Okay, so the Herfindahl index is also known as the Hirschman index, or HHI. Is a measure of the size of firms. Is the measure of the size of firms in relation to the industry. So once again, the Herfindahl index is a measure of the size of the firms in relation to the industry. Is a measure of the size of the firms in relation to the industry. And it is a good indicator of the amount of competition among them. So the size of the firm in the industry and an indicator of the amount of competition among them. It is a good indicator of the amount of competition among them. Okay? So how do these competitors fare? How do they compete with each other? The Herfindahl index tells you that. The higher the index, the greater the level of concentration. All right? Let's go through some examples and you'll understand. So here, everything is still the same thing, same car companies, the same columns, but now we've got the Herfindahl index. The formula is the sum of the market share, doesn't matter which market share you use, sum of the market share, and then you do to the an exponent, right? So the power of 2 for everything. Okay? So 50% to the power of 2, 20% to the power of 2. So you do that for every one of these market shares for units. You'll get, if you added up all these percent, or not percent, all these numbers, you get 0.325. Same thing, you're going to do it for the other side. Okay? So the power of 2, power of 2, power of 2, and you add it up all together, that is your index. And that index is 0.2661. Alright? So, once again, you will take the market share and you will multiply them. You actually do it, multiply each other, but it's basically to the power of 2, okay? For all of it, and then you add up to a total. Alright? You add up to a total. Then you get that number. That number is known as the Herfindahl index. Now let's talk. How do you know if that index is high or low? Like, what does it really mean? There's a general rule of thumb. Okay? 10,000 is a pure monopoly. If the number is 10,000, then you know the whole thing is dominated by one main giant, if not just one. If it's one, it's pure competitive market, meaning that there are many, many competitors and everyone has a fair chance. Okay? If there's good competition, many competitors, and they all have an equal chance. Now, if it's under 1,500, it's a competitive market. It's good, but not pure. It's good. 15 to 25 is moderate. Moderately concentrated to a few larger players, but still not too bad. But when you get over 2,500, it is likely to be a highly concentrated market, whereby the top few players dominate the whole industry, or whole market, so to speak. Okay? You won't get, it's unlikely to get 10,000, but I'm just letting you know, anything above 25 is considered to be quite concentrated to a few leading players. Now let me be asking Stephen, all these numbers are very big. They don't match the numbers here. I agree with you. Okay? Basically, it doesn't matter. You can look at it in thousands, or you can look at it in decimals. It's exactly the same thing. So 0.26, 0.32, all right, will fall under where? If you just multiply by all those by 1,000, or is it 10,000? Yeah, the industry is more seemingly on the highly concentrated side. Yes, it's more concentrated. Because if you look at the table here, right, Zipper, Twister, A1 combined already is 85%, right, for both sides of things. And so when we look at the preferential index, it's already telling you that this industry is concentrated. You may be wondering, what is the application of doing this? Well, what may be interesting to know is the government actually look at these numbers. Now, it's much more complicated than this. They look at these numbers as a way to determine whether they're going to approve a merger and acquisition or not. Okay? So, when a big company wants to acquire another company, if it does require regulatory approval, the government will be looking at the preferential index to ensure that the company and the industry is not going to be too concentrated. So it's actually done in real life. All right. So, why don't we take it up? The paper, yes? You want to do it? You want to do it next week? Did I hear next week? Okay. So let's do it next week then for the metrics worksheet, right?